interest in completing FAFSA on FAFSA.gov. The website, I just want to point that out, it is a free application, FAFSA.gov. If you go to FAFSA.com or FAFSA.edu, you'll probably be asked to pay for the application. So if you're being asked to pay, just know, okay, I typed in the wrong address, I need to go to FAFSA.gov, because this is a free application and it will always be free. Students who are not yet in their senior year can complete what's called the FAFSA forecaster at the same website, and it allows you to fill in the information. You're not doing the actual application yet, but you can still fill in the information and get an idea of what federal aid you might be eligible for. This is what the website looks like, just to give you an idea of the website you should be on. Once again, FAFSA.gov. It generally takes less than 30 minutes to complete. It is getting less and less complicated every year. In the past, even when I was a student, it could take a long time and be a little confusing, but they're kind of tweaking it every year to make it more user-friendly. There's coming up this school year, there's a mobile-friendly version that's being put out. So it does, it's really not that complicated as it used to be. And just a little bit about the sections on the FAFSA. It is going to ask for demographic information for both student and parent, financial information. You do get to choose colleges and universities. You can place up to 10 schools on one FAFSA application, so you don't have to do a new application for every single school. And I won't necessarily go over all this in detail, but just helpful information. You do, in general, have to have things like this ready in front of you to do the FAFSA. So you do have to put financial information on it. The student has to provide their driver's license number, social security numbers. You might need a W-2. So I just wanted to point that out. It does help if you have that stuff kind of ready ahead of time, rather than starting it, having to go get that stuff and come back 2 or 3 different times. Okay, and something important too, every student and parent has to have what's called an FSA ID and password. So you have to create that first before you do the FAFSA application in order to submit it. So the student has to have one, the parent has to sign one, has to have one. You use that to electronically sign the FAFSA at the end. Yes, ma'am?
If I've already got a FAFSA for one student and this is my next student, do I create a whole new ID, or can I go under my existing ID and add a student?
That's a good question. You do not have to create a new one. Your new student will have to create one for him or herself, but you won't have to create a new one. But yeah, that has to be had first before the FAFSA can be completed and submitted. And it is a good idea, that last point there, to write it down, or else you're going to have to reset it every year. That happens, very common, but it is a good idea to just write all of this stuff down, keep it in one place together, and that way you're ready next year, because the FAFSA does have to be renewed every year. So this school year that we're in right now, the 2018-2019 school year, went by the 2018-19 FAFSA, then there will be a 2019-20 FAFSA, then a 2021 FAFSA, and you do have to renew it every year.
Are we going to be able to get a copy of this presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, I will be happy to, yeah.
I'll email it out to everybody after.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be a good idea to kind of go through it on your own time. So when to apply? The FAFSA becomes available on October 1st of the year prior to your student entering college. So on October 1st of this year, the 2019-2020 FAFSA will become available. We recommend people to do it starting on October 1st. It's a great idea to get it done early. It's kind of just one less thing to be worrying about now. You don't have to be worrying about it in July when your student's about to start school in August. You've already done it months prior. And also a lot of schools have priority deadlines. So UAB, for example, has a December 1st priority deadline. And some of the funding types that I'm going to go into in a few slides have limited funding. So the Department of Education allocates only a certain amount of money for these certain awards, and they are kind of given on a first-come, first-served basis. So it is a great idea to get your FAFSA done early, as you might have access to some limited dollar fundings that other people might miss out on if they do their FAFSA late. And just a note too about income information on the FAFSA. The FAFSA uses prior year to your prior tax information. So for the 2018-19 school year that we just started in August, it used 2016 tax information. And that will be that way going forward. So if you guys have students who are starting college next fall for 2019-2020 school year, it will use 2017 tax information. This IRS data retrieval tool right here, we highly recommend. That is in about the midway point of your FAFSA, when you're about to start supplying financial information. You can click on the IRS data retrieval tool link and it will import your tax information directly from the IRS and just autofill all of that for you. So you don't have to go line by line entering your adjusted gross income and your wages and all of this. It will just import it for you. And that really cuts down on the time. And again, I kind of covered that already. Why begin so early? It's largely for those limited dollar programs. Institutional grants, these things that are given out on a first come, first served basis. And then just personally, once again, it's just one less thing to worry about. At UAB, we just started our school year on August 27th, and we had students who were just then doing their FAFSA. Payment deadlines are coming up, and they're getting stressed about their financial aid not being processed yet. So just the earlier you do it, the less you have to worry about when your student's trying to start school and move into their dorm and all these other fun, exciting things, and they don't want to be worrying about the FAFSA at that point. Okay, so tax information, just a little bit more about that. Income information along with other data is used to determine what types of aid your student is going to be eligible for. So that's why we ask for tax information. It is going to determine what, especially grants, but what student loans and grants, which is money that does not have to be paid back, your student is going to be eligible for. Okay, and a little bit about the parental information that is required on the FAFSA. Students do have to provide parental information about biological or adoptive parents. I'm going to go ahead and put this up there. And you guys feel free to ask me questions about this now or after the presentation. But if parents are divorced, then they have to provide the parental information of the parent who the student lived with more during that year. So for 2018-19, when we're using 2016 tax information, it's still going to be 2016 tax information, but it's going to be who the student lived with more during this current 12 months. If the parent is remarried, then the step parents information does have to be provided. If the parents are unmarried but living together, then the parents still have to be listed. Yes?
My concern and my question is about the ex-parent, not the ex-parent, the ex-spouse. So the child's parent, they don't live with a non-custodial parent. Alabama no longer allows the child or the custodial parent to force the other parent to pay for school. They overturned Bayless a few years ago. So if you have an ex who refuses to contribute, now there's no recourse in Alabama. How does that affect financial aid? Because my understanding is they still consider the other parent.
No. So I'm going to go into a little bit in a few slides. Professional judgments is what we call it. So for different situations where income may be different now than it was in 2016, or if the parents are divorced now and they weren't then, the school in question, you'd probably have to communicate with your school's financial aid office, will update the FAFSA sort of after the fact. So if you had a married filing jointly tax return in 2016, then obviously that's going to be the tax information on the FAFSA, but we can go out and separate out the spouse's income after the fact.
Okay, and if you've been divorced for a nice long time, then they're not going to go consider
No, they
their
wouldn't
spouse.
even be on the FAFSA in the first place. Yeah. So if the divorce has happened many years, that kind of thing, then the ex-spouse would not even be on the FAFSA to begin with.
But Carla, can I just jump
Yes.
in? Some colleges require another form called the CSS profile. The CSS profile will require all, not just divorced parents, but also step-parents' income. So just be warned, that tends to be private colleges, mostly in the Northeast, some on the West Coast.
Yeah, I
The
don't know if
FAFSA
many-
doesn't, but the profile
Yeah.
does, so.
I don't know of many schools around this area that use that. It is-
Nobody in Alabama does, but a lot in the Northeast, so sometimes families are surprised when they run into that.
And then what if a student lives with someone other than their parents? So grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, aunts and uncles, anything like that is not going to be considered a parent that has to be put on the FAFSA unless that child's been adopted. There are questions on the FAFSA that ask the student, are you under legal guardianship? Are you, have some other special circumstance like that? And you can answer yes to that question, and then at that point, the financial aid office would get involved. We would contact you and just talk to you a little bit more about what's going on there and what we exactly need. But you would not put those people on the FAFSA as a parent. It would be some sort of special circumstance. Okay, and what if someone other than the parent claims to tax return, it doesn't matter, the parent still needs to be added. In addition, the student is not going to be considered independent, meaning they don't have to put their parent on there if they filed their own tax return and their parent didn't claim them. That really doesn't matter for the FAFSA purposes. The parent's information is still going to be on the application. If the student is an orphan, an emancipated minor, or is homeless, once again, those are things that we and any other financial aid office is going to handle on a case-by-case basis. So if that's on the FAFSA and any other special circumstance related, then we would receive that FAFSA, we would see that one of these special circumstances is indicated, and then we would contact the student for more information. So that's something that's kind of just handled on a case-by-case basis, probably with any college that you went to. Yes, ma'am?
I'm back up a little bit with the step parent.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my questions come from. And I know on FAFSA we have to put the step parents' income in.
That's right.
But what if, and I know it addresses says even if they're not supporting, is to financial aid, is there a way to talk to financial aid and say, really the support is coming from my income, not?
No, ma'am, unfortunately not. It's a federal regulation that the step parent has to be included, and it's not looking at, well, the step parent doesn't pay for college. It's looking at the household. They might buy food, or they might pay, they might buy clothes, or they pay for the household in general. So I don't know of any situation in which the step parent could be left off. Okay. And then once again, just to touch on, if the student thinks that he or she should be considered independent, the student is not going to be considered independent unless they're 24 or older, if they're married themselves, or if they have dependents of their own, if they have a child of their own, is a veteran or active duty military. So things like this are what makes the student considered independent and not having to supply their parents' tax information. If they don't meet one of those criteria, or maybe one of the special circumstances that we mentioned on the last slide, like orphan or emancipated or something like that, then they're not going to be considered independent, and they are going to have to provide their parents' tax information. And then if the parents are not U.S. citizens or legal immigrants, then that is also something we handle on a case-by-case basis. And once again, that's not UAB specific. That would be pretty much any school. We would just have to talk with the family and see what the situation was, and then proceed from there. Sometimes when if the parent is not a U.S. citizen, doesn't have a social security number, they may not be able to do the things online, but they may be able to do it by paper. So that's something we can just help with. Okay, so the FAFSA is completed. What happens next? It does take a couple of days for the FAFSA to be processed by the Department of Education. So when you submit your FAFSA, it's being submitted to the Department of Ed first, not to the school first. They do processing on their end. They send you something called a Student Aid Report, an SAR, and that's basically just a summary of your FAFSA and everything that you put on it to give you an opportunity to read through it and double check it. You can make corrections to your FAFSA if you look over that and find a mistake has been made. And then your financial aid office from your school would let you know if any additional information is needed. Okay, so the EFC, Estimated Family Contribution, this is the number that the FAFSA calculates based on the family information, the financial information. All of that is going to calculate this number called EFC, and that is the number that will determine your student's eligibility for grants, loans, need-based aid, all of that. So it's not a bill or the amount you're expected to pay. So if you get your FAFSA information back and it says your EFC is $5,000 or $20,000, it doesn't mean that you have to pay that to the school. That's just a tool that the financial aid office uses to award your student their financial aid. Okay, and sometimes you might get asked for more information, and we do just want to briefly touch on this because 30% of the student body of any school that uses federal financial aid is required, every school is required to select 30% of the student population for this process called verification. And all that means is that we have to ask for paper documents to verify that the information on the FAFSA is correct. So that if you do get selected for that process, it's completely at random. You just happen to be part of that 30%. And we will ask you to turn in a paper tax document, maybe paper W-2s, things like that, to verify that the information on the FAFSA is correct. That can delay your student getting their financial aid award offer. So if you get a notification about verification, just try to take care of it quickly, get those tax documents to your school's financial aid office quickly, and then as soon as that's all done, then your student will get their award offer. if you don't fit into any of these situations we just talked about, professional judgment is what most schools call this when we have a special circumstance. So we usually ask for just a written statement explaining the circumstances, any additional documentation, and just a few examples. If a parent has passed away or there's been a divorce, we know that using 2-year prior tax information, obviously many changes could have happened since then. So if there's been a job loss or a job change that just has lower income, any number of special circumstances, you still have to submit the FAFSA with 2016 tax information, but then you could contact your school's financial aid office about doing one of these professional judgments so that we can update the financial information to what is accurate. So for UAB, for example, we can update if there was a significant income loss maybe that occurred during 2017. We can update the FAFSA to your 2017 taxes. For job loss occurring during 2018, it would have to be continuing for 6 months or more before we could update the FAFSA. But that's just so you all know that even if you are required to submit 2016 tax information, it can be brought more up to date later if you've had a significant income change. Okay, so now a little bit about what aid you might be offered from the FAFSA now that you've submitted it. There is need-based aid and there is non-need-based aid. So right over here we've got these separated out. Need-based aid, Pell Grant. This grant is called SEOG, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Subsidized loans, which are loans that do not accrue interest until after the student graduates. And work study, which is funding for on-campus jobs. And I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail here. These awards over here, your income, your family size, anything that might make you eligible for a need-based award is not going to matter in getting these awards over here. Okay, so we'll start with the Pell Grant. This is a foundation of federal financial aid. Anyone that's eligible for this award gets it, regardless of any other circumstances. Undergraduate students with low EFCs, and again, that's that estimated family contribution from your FAFSA. The award amount varies each year. These are funds appropriated by Congress. It does tend to go up a little bit each year, though. So I have updated numbers for 18-19. So for the last year, 17-18 school year, the max was $5,920 per year, split in half evenly between the fall and spring semesters. This year it went up to $6,095, so $3,048 per year. So it's not a huge increase, but it does tend to go up a couple $100 every year. And just a little bit more information, there is a lifetime loan limit on this award, and it does depend on the amount of enrollment hours for the student for the given semester. So just for example, if they were enrolled half-time, they would get half-time Pell. If they were enrolled full-time, they'd get full-time Pell. So it does based on hours of enrollment as well. Okay, so the SEOG grant. This grant is actually only given to students with the highest level of financial need. So if your EFC goes back 0, then you would be eligible for this grant. It is different at different schools. So if you get an SAR, that student aid report back from maybe 3 or 4 different universities, one may not participate in SEOG, they may not have it at all. One may offer 2,000 SEOG, one may offer 1,000. It is going to be different depending on how much funding the Department of Education appropriates to each school. But that would be part of the award package at most schools that use the FAFSA. And once again, the Pell Grant and the SEOG are awards that do not have to be paid back. Okay, so a little bit about our student loans. The student loans are offered to everyone. So by doing the FAFSA, you're going to be offered student loans. The grants are what you may or may not be eligible for, but everyone's going to be eligible for student loans. There's 2 types. Once again, the subsidized loan is need-based. It does not accrue interest until after the student graduates. The unsubsidized loan is not need-based, so that any student is going to get that loan regardless of what your EFC number is. The annual limits are based on the student's year in school. Typically right now, that amount is $5,500 for freshmen, $6,500 for sophomores, $7,500 for juniors and seniors. So it increases a little bit every year, and it's purely based on the student's year in school. The amount is not need-based or based on the cost of attendance or anything like that. It's just based on the student's year in school. The interest rates are fixed for the life of the loan. They do change every year. They go up sometimes and down sometimes. They're 4.45% this year. So that's for the unsubsidized loan that will start accruing interest right away from the time it pays out, not from the time it's accepted. So UAB, for example, we make our award offers to students in the early spring. So February, March, that kind of thing. It doesn't pay out until classes start in August. So the interest doesn't start accruing when you accept it, back when you get your award offer in February. If not, it starts accruing in August when it pays out. Yes, ma'am.
A question about these federal loans. When I was in graduate school a long time ago, we would borrow money and we wouldn't get a check for that amount because there were fees involved. So, for example, if I borrow $5,000 for my tuition, I might get $4,800 or $4,700 because they were, quote, fees. Now I'm paying interest on that.
You only pay interest on the amount that pays out to you.
Well, they had us paying interest on the whole thing. And at any rate, my question was, so I'm marked as getting $5,000, but I'm really not getting that, and when you're doing it with lots of different loans and grants and stuff, it can shrink it. Do they still do that?
Yes, ma'am. So the federal loans, these loans right here have a 1% origination fee. So let's say, for instance, the freshman amount of $5,500, it's $2,750 per semester. Everything gets split up evenly between fall and spring. So your disbursement at $2,750 actually pays out at $2,721. So it takes out about $30 or so for that 1% origination fee. And all federal loans have that fee, yeah. And that's a good question. We get asked about that a lot. Students wonder why the difference. But yeah, that is correct. And that's kind of the amount that the government keeps before they pay out to you. That's not going to the school. UAB is not keeping that money, or your university is not keeping that money. It's a federal fee. And then just a little bit more about these interest rates. These are the rates at which it accrues interest, which is different from that origination fee. So yeah, this kind of fluctuates. Last year it was 4, I think, and it went up to 4.45. It's come down before in past years too, so it kind of just fluctuates. Those interest rates there. The subsidized loan does have the same interest rate. It just doesn't start accruing interest until after the student graduates or leaves school.
So I have a question. So then the unsubsidized, basically, you would have two things you could do. You could pay the interest as you go along, right? Or even right at the end before you're going to.
Yes, ma'am.
But if you don't, then that's capitalized, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I recommend that to a lot of students, to pay the interest as you go. So when you graduate, you only have the capital, because if you're making those interest payments, it's very small, little, maybe like $5 here, $10 here, and then when you graduate, you only have the principal to pay on. Yes, ma'am.
So who's getting that statement?
Who's getting the loan repayment?
Yeah.
These are student loans, so they go
Right.
into the student's name.
Okay, because my son has just started college, and he says he's not received anything. And I'm like,
It
"You
takes
should pay
about-
that interest, but I don't know how to pay it."
Yeah, of course.
I
It
don't know where
takes
it's at.
it takes about a month or so. So it is the federal government we're dealing with. Unfortunately, things don't happen super quickly.
But it'll go to
so
the student.
if the loan pays out, for example, for UAB, the money paid out on August 27th, the first day of school, it's going to take about a month or so for the federal government to assign loan servicers. And then once those get assigned, the loan servicer does contact the student. So I have student loans of my own. My loan servicer is called Fed Loan Servicing. They contact me, email and mail. And you can set up online accounts with them to make payments. You can call, but they do courtesy contact you once they get assigned to be your servicer. You can always contact the financial aid office as well. I had a student call the other day and say, "Hey, I got contacted by this company called Ed Financial, and they're asking me to pay. Is this legitimate?" And I am able to log on to the federal government website and say, "Yes, that is your loan servicer. You can talk to them." So if you get something in the mail and you're not sure, you can always contact your school's financial aid office to double check that. Yes,
And
ma'am.
you may, just because I put, because I'm that parent, sorry, when I did my for older son's FAFSA, I put my email address in, so I get the statement. So he still pays, we do it together, but I get the statement. You may, once you get your servicer, you may have to set up a preference to get mail or get email or to get notifications, or it might just be on you to log on and pay whenever you think of it. So those kinds of things may not be automatic once you get your servicer, you may have to set that up.
Yeah, you do. I have, for myself, I have an online account with my servicer, sort of like an online banking account where I set that up with them. So that's usually the best way to go rather than doing things over the phone. And let me just speak to what you said real quick. If you can work that out with your student about who wants to receive this and who's going to pay on this. But for your FSA ID purposes, make sure you're not using the same email for both the student and the parent's FSA ID, that login we talked about for the FAFSA, because that might mess you up. So if you do make it your email address, then make sure you're using a different email address for the FSA ID so you don't get messed up there. Did I see another question over here? Did you have another question, ma'am?
Oh, yeah, and I might be skipping ahead here, but these are loans that my child would take out in their name.
Correct.
Are there loans available for parents?
Yes, ma'am. There are, and I do have a slide on that.
I'm
Mhm.
skipping ahead, okay. I
Yeah, no,
apologize.
that's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yes, and that's a good thing to just to remind that if these loans are accepted, and every school will offer them first, they will not get automatically accepted. Since they are a loan, your student will have to go onto whatever student portal, student account they have for their college and push the accept button, and they will go into your student's name. Okay? And on to the next, just a little bit more about the loans. The students do have to be enrolled at least half-time or more to receive them. And that's not a problem with most first-time freshmen. But if you were thinking, oh, I'll just take one class to try it out and see how it goes, you won't be eligible for the federal loans. You do have to be at least half-time status, which is usually 2 classes or more. They're not credit-based, so there's not going to be any kind of credit check run at all. They're not repayable until the student falls below half-time enrollment, and it does carry a 6-month grace period. Now, you can pay early. There's no penalty for early repayment, but your student will not be required to pay until graduation plus 6 months, or leaving the school plus 6 months. There's a standard repayment period of 10 years with your servicer. However, each servicer offers multiple repayment plans. Probably, I would say, 10 or so different repayment plans. So you're going to have a lot of choices there. You don't have to just get locked into the standard one. Okay, and just a little bit about work study. This is a great program. I had a work study job as a student, and it just allows your student to work at an on-campus job. Some colleges even have off-campus jobs. The funding that they earn doesn't pay towards their tuition. It pays to them, just like a normal job. They're going to be paid at least minimum wage or more. A lot of jobs might allow your student to do some homework while they're there. But it's a good way to get a little work experience while still going to school, build their work schedule around their class schedule, and not overload themselves. Most jobs are limited to part-time work, 20 hours or less per week. This is one of those limited funding awards. So if your student is interested in work study, then that's when you want to get that FAFSA done early. And most schools are going to have job boards that your student can search online for those. UAB has that. We have on-campus jobs, off-campus jobs, tutoring positions, all sorts of things available for students. Okay, and here's a little bit about that parent loan. This is a federal loan, just like the FAFSA. It comes through the Department of Education, studentloans.gov, for parents to take out for their children. So this one is called Parent Plus. The interest rate, I know this says 16-17, that's just a mistake. It is updated for 18-19. The interest rate is 7%. That also changes. It goes up a little bit sometimes, down a little bit sometimes. This loan is comparable with private loans. So at UAB and at previous universities that I've worked at, students sometimes you choose to pursue a loan maybe through Regions Bank or through Wells Fargo Bank. You can do that, and the financial aid office processes those as well. With some of those private lenders, you may get a lower interest rate, just depending on your own credit and history and that sort of thing. But for a lot of people, the Parent Plus loan is the best choice and the easiest one to go with. It has, once again, all those easy federal repayment plans, deferred while the student is in school. Now, you can't defer interest on this one like the subsidized loan, but you can defer payments if needed. It does require a credit check or for you to have a cosigner. The good thing about this loan too is that the student can get money out of it somehow. So if you think, my credit is not that great, it might get denied, you apply for the loan and you do get denied, it'll still give you 3 choices. You can have that cosigner and be approved through the cosigner. You can appeal the decision if you think that you have some sort of special circumstance affecting your credit. You can appeal that denial to the Department of Education, get approved that way. If neither of those are options for you, then you can choose to receive something called denial funds, and with